Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. The Mac is back, boys and girls. I'm back. Q's back. You're back. Everybody's back. So grab that coffee. High five your neighbor. You know what? Better just fist bump them. You got that Corona cooties going around. Fist bump your neighbor, and let's get ready for the boomerang. It's 38:06, 37 minutes after the hour of 12. We get a Twitter status to Carly. ***. Text Trump to 88022 at Carluska P on Twitter. This used to be a different name, didn't it, Carly? And she says, this is quite a bombshell right before Iowa caucuses. Sorry, hashtag creepy quid pro Joe. Let's check it out.
With the president discussing what he described in effect as a quid pro quo. Why not hear from John Bolton to describe that?
I can assume the following: that the president suspended the aid for a period of time to make sure the Bidens were looked at by the Ukraine, and that the Ukrainians would look at allegations of election interference in 2016. What has been clear to me in this trial, that there's every reason in the world to want to look at Hunter Biden's conduct, that the public purpose that we're talking about is that when Joe Biden, my friend, got up in front of the Ukrainian parliament and said the time for sweetheart deals is over in the energy sector, his son receiving $3 million from Burisma undercut that message, and that will be pursued outside of impeachment. That to me is a legitimate point of inquiry, even if you assume the facts most favorable to the government. And this is not a crime. This is a partisan impeachment. And I'm hoping a few Democrats will say, I don't like President Trump, I don't agree with his policies, but we should never do this again, because the House in Republican hands, trust me, could do the same thing. And I may find myself in a position of where partisan impeachment comes to the Senate involving a Democrat, and I hope I would rise to the occasion.
Sir, on what do you base your increasing optimism that you'll block witnesses?
Everybody believes that there's a scintilla of evidence that the Bidens were involved in business practices that undercut U.S. foreign policy interests in the Ukraine. The manager said this is a hoax, it's been debunked, it hasn't. If there's not a scintilla of evidence, I would argue if you can find a scintilla of evidence, then it makes the president's concerns reasonable, non-personal, and all you need to do is show a public motive, not an exclusively solely personal motive. I buy what Dershowitz is saying.
Have you heard there were fewer than 4 votes for Republican votes?
I think Mr. Dershowitz has convinced people. You can assume the facts, as you said, most favorable to the government, and still find that the evidence would suggest there's a scintilla of reason.
Well, that, my friends, is what we call a graham cracker. Congratulations to Carly for getting a shout out from Q, although I selfishly was hoping you were going to insert one of your famous laughs. Maybe next time. Anyway, impeachment coming to an end, we shall see. But we do know that there's likely going to be attempts to send new articles to Senate to delay. Remember that this isn't really about removing the president. This is simply about tying up the Senate, tying up everything until they can try and figure out what they're going to do for elections, right? And of course, we have the State of the Union coming up next week. And this is interesting because we just heard from Lindsey Graham. If you'll remember, a couple of years ago, President Trump gave a very, what I would almost call infamous State of the Union speech. It was great. He was dropping bombs on everyone. And of course, you could kind of see where loyalties were lying just by the looks on people's faces, right? And of course, it seemed like a weight was lifted off the shoulders of one Lindsey Graham right around that time. And of course, he's sort of been playing ball ever since then. I'm not saying he's a white hat. I'm just saying he's playing ball. But I would imagine that they're going to try and get these new articles, these new bombshells, which we'll probably hear about in the next 48 hours. They're probably going to try and get it in as soon as they can. We got a weekend coming up, and of course, State of the Union next week. So they're likely going to want to do that before the State of the Union, because they know that this is the one time when the POTUS can really, really get some shine. And what I mean is, right now, actually, even as I speak, I'm kind of watching. Unfortunately, I can't really hear all the audio, but I'm sort of watching the Trump rally go on right now at the time I'm making this video. And my point is that while you have thousands packing into arenas to see the POTUS speak, news doesn't want to cover it, right? And of course, they can find all kinds of reasons to turn off from here, but you can't really do that with the State of the Union. And if you do, you're really throwing your own boomerang, right? And that's essentially what the House is doing. That's what the media is doing. They know that POTUS is going to get the mic on the State of the Union, and this is going to be one of those times, one of those few times every year where it's going to be really hard to unplug that mic, because we know that the State of the Union needs to get covered. So I would imagine POTUS is going to use this to say, hey, I've been cleared. And I imagine that they're going to try and, basically squelch this whole impeachment before the State of the Union too. So it looks like a race for time to me, but either way, boomerang coming. And then Q references this line from our national anthem: "And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof to the night that our flag was still there." I think most of you are familiar with that. But if you're not American, that is part of our American national anthem, written by Francis Scott Key, and he was talking, of course, at the time about the battle at Fort McHenry. This would have been back in 1812 in the harbor of Baltimore, and of course the British Royal Navy was bombarding Fort McHenry, and he was witnessing the flag still stand. And even when it was falling over and had holes in it and it was tattered and whatnot, another person would come to lift that flag up. Very inspiring story, and I think that that's why so many of us really enjoy our national anthem. It's a beautiful song, and I think there's probably some other references there that we may end up finding out in the future too. But I do think that the point is that despite the attempts to bring it down, it's still there. Post 3807, 52 minutes after the hour of 12, we get taken back to post 2219 from the 19th of September 2018, where Anon was asking Q, are they going to continue to hide behind sexual misconduct, or will the truth come out? And at this time, we were seeing a lot of different CEOs, politicians stepping down over sort of this general sexual misconduct sort of thing. And you've probably seen this throughout the last couple of years, where lots of people have been accused of sexual misconduct, whether it be at the office or on the campaign trail or something like that. But we don't always get these specifics. We don't get any necessarily human trafficking or rape kind of charges, just sort of general sexual misconduct. And of course, Q responds, sexual misconduct is the public shelter to accept resignation. Watch those announcing 2020 presidential running. You cannot attack a political opponent. None are protected. None are safe. So it seems like what Q is really saying here is that some of the people that are running for president are doing so simply because they have something to hide. And of course, we're seeing this kind of play out with Joe Biden. The big excuse for a lot of the left is that, hey, you're attacking Joe Biden because he's a political opponent, not because his son Hunter was actually on the take for a Ukraine energy company, but because you're attacking him simply because he's running against you. You get the idea. And we're seeing this really throughout, and this would be something that would be very classic, of course, if HRC were running or still decides to try and run. This will be a classic tactic. Now, who knows how many of them are actually hiding something that is much more devious than sexual misconduct. We know all sorts of money is being moved around, but we don't necessarily know who is guilty of human trafficking and these really, really big crimes. We don't know that, but we do know that this has been implied. It's been implied by Q, and we're seeing it play out, like I just said, with Joe Biden. Q says these people are stupid. And here's another recent example right here from Elizabeth Dances with Wolves Warren. Disinformation and online foreign interference erode our democracy. It erodes it so much that we forget to call it a republic. And Donald Trump has invited both. Anyone who seeks to challenge and defeat Donald Trump in the 2020 election must be fully prepared to take this on, and I've got a plan to do it. Okay, well, Donald Trump invited both. I don't remember Donald Trump inviting Fusion GPS. I don't remember Donald Trump inviting CrowdStrike. I don't remember any of that. Just saying. In the 2016 election, we saw how digital disinformation was used to influence and suppress voters. We sure did. And we've got the illegal FISA warrants that'll gonna take us to it. But 4 years later, we're hardly better prepared for it. Donald Trump has welcomed foreign interference in our election. And if he isn't removed from office, he'll continue to do so. So you get the idea. She's gone off on a little diatribe. She's gone off on the warpath right here, beating the war drums. Elizabeth dances with wolves. Now, before we move on to the next post, I want to turn you on to this tweet from Mr. Jones, who says, surreal. Hot mic moment catches someone discussing shift statement about contact with the whistleblower. And that whistleblower I cannot name right now, but his name rhymes with Gary, Farm, and Villa. And it's going to be a little hard to hear the audio here, but you can see in the quotes, this is what's being said. He's protected by, there's a speech and debate clause for members of Congress, so they can say anything they want with immunity. Yikes, check it out.
He's protected by the speech and debate clause for members of Congress, so they can say anything they want with immunity.
Yikes. Well, if you weren't able to hear it, that's exactly what was said. Very interesting indeed. It may provide a little bit of context for the next post. Well done, Mr. Jones. Post 3808 comes in at 1 minute after the hour of 1. We get a Fox News link, and Q says, worth remembering, whistleblower source 1 and 2 NSC, being the National Security Council. This article is from back in November of 2017. Sessions, being Jeff Sessions, Justice Department has 27 investigations into epidemic of leaks. So if you'll remember, around this time, we were getting a ton of leaks. And this was sort of quietly done. Jeff Sessions came out and said it. But 27 investigations seems like quite a bit, right? The Justice Department has a whopping 27 open investigations into leaks of classified information with a political motive. Attorney General Jeff Sessions revealed Tuesday. That's 3 times more than the agency has had in the 3 years prior. The nation's top law enforcement officer gave new details on the active probes during his highly anticipated testimony before the House Judiciary Committee. Leaks have reached epidemic proportions, Sessions said. We have 27 ongoing investigations. Some of those involve leaks before President Trump took office and some after. And that's really telling right there, because this shows that there was some spying going on too before President Trump took office. Sessions added, but before that, it was only 3 per year. So 3 per year, there were 9. There are 3 times as many this year as in the entire 3 years before being investigated. John, how many is that? I know, it was a trick question. Representative Ron DeSantis of Florida pressed Sessions over whether anyone had been held accountable criminally or administratively for leaking information against the Trump administration with a political motive. Sessions responded that the individual in Georgia had been charged. Sessions was referring to National Security Agency contractor Reality Winner, who leaked a classified intelligence report containing top secret level information. The report, according to the Justice Department, contained classified defense information from an intelligence community agency. Winner was an avid supporter of Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. Okay, so this sounds a little bit more like leaking than whistleblowing, right? It cannot be allowed to continue, and we will do our best effort to ensure it does not continue. The stepped-up investigations come amid pressure from the White House. President Trump criticized Sessions in July for being weak on such issues. Okay, so at this point, we should get the idea. It looks like our quote-unquote whistleblowers are really a couple of sources, and it sounds more like they're, as Chanel Rion over there at OANN says, whistle leakers, right? And boy, I sure hope we find out who those guys are. Maybe Sean Hannity will break it to us on Fox. I wonder if it rhymes with Cisco and Barbarella. Sure hope someone breaks it to us. Gosh, I'd really like to know. Let's move on to 3809. This comes in at 10 minutes after the hour of 1. Responding to an Anon who posts this about Pelosi, Pelosi claims Trump violated the Constitution in weekly press briefing. There's the stats right there, and the link takes you to the speech. It's about a 20-minute speech if you'd like to see it. I personally would not, but there's Nancy Pants right there looking sharp with her new haircut. She's all good to go. Q says, Supreme Court to hear case regarding legality of impeachment articles drafted by House. Clean record. Yeah, remember, Pelosi's been saying this whole thing about once you're impeached forever. Impeached forever. Well, that's not necessarily true if we realize that the legality of the articles drafted by the House are all completely bunk. That's going to wipe that all from the record, right? And of course, we know that the FISA applications were bunk. We know that a lot of this information coming from Fusion GPS was funded by the DNC. We know that 302s were altered. We know that there's been a lot of lying and leaking going on in the development of things that basically led up to these impeachment articles. So if that's all bunk, then I guess you have to swipe the record, and indeed you are not impeached forever. Failed to support Constitution, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Yeah, look, I'm all for impeaching. There's a reason why we have that process, but it needs to show some serious business by way of that. And if you see that really that didn't lead up to that, this information was all straight up not legit. We see that it's clear partisan politics. And like I said earlier, and I think most of you know all this already, we're not really trying to remove the POTUS. If you're a Democrat at this point, they're smart enough to know that. They're just going to keep throwing out these articles. But it's just another reason to keep dragging things through the news and hopefully stretch this out to the 2020 elections. Now, I figured some of you would thoroughly enjoy this. This is a tweet from Heather Monahan, who tweets, "Wow, Chief Justice John Roberts just had to read aloud Senator Elizabeth Warren's question about whether he loses credibility for presiding over a trial without witnesses or evidence." And I think you're really going to enjoy his reaction at the end. Check it out.
The question from Senator Warren is for the House managers. At a time when large majorities of Americans have lost faith in government, does the fact that the Chief Justice is presiding over an impeachment trial in which Republican senators have thus far refused to allow witnesses or evidence contribute to the loss of legitimacy of the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court, and the Constitution?
Yeah, well, that sounds pretty illegitimate when your own folks are calling you illegitimate. Interesting indeed. So this will be really interesting to see how this plays out. But I will show you something that appears to be fairly legitimate, and that is this right here. That's right, Chief Justice John Roberts' name on those Epstein flight logs. Dun, dun, dun. Now, to be fair, I want to point out PBI is Palm Beach International and TEB is Teterboro. So it doesn't look like John Roberts went to the island, but he was indeed on the plane. I wonder if they'll be bringing that up. Oh wait, there's no witnesses. Post 3810, 38 minutes after the hour of 1, we get a little Lincolnberg right here. It takes you to Fox News. And this was from just earlier. DOJ relents, says it would accept probation for Michael Flynn as he moves to withdraw guilty plea. The DOJ backed down from seeking jail time Wednesday and made clear that prosecutors would accept mere probation in the case of former Trump National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, a shift that comes as Flynn moves to withdraw his guilty plea, leveraging accusations of government misconduct. All right, this is interesting right off the bat, because they really wanted to put this guy away. Now they're going to accept probation, and it's not very much at all. Just weeks ago, the DOJ said it would seek up to 6 months of prison time for the retired Army Lieutenant General who spent just 24 days at his post in the Trump administration. Represented by an aggressive new attorney, Flynn days later had moved to withdraw his guilty plea for making false statements to 2 FBI agents in 2017. Statements that eventually wrapped him up in former special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. Yeah, remember, he was kind of pressured into offering up a guilty plea. And if you'll remember, the judge who took that guilty plea was one Rudolph Contreras, who just happened to be a personal buddy of one Peter Strzok. Yeah. Quote, "In truth, I never lied. Flynn wrote in a new supplemental motion to withdraw his guilty plea filed Wednesday. My guilty plea has rankled me throughout this process, and while I allowed myself to succumb to the threats from the government to save my family, I believe I was grossly misled about what really happened." Flynn also blamed his former lawyers for providing him with bad information that led him to plead guilty. And if you'll remember, this current judge was the one that was saying, man, you should really overturn this. Now, let me take you down a little bit further here. In support of a potential sentence of probation, the government notes two similarly situated high-ranking officials who committed similar crimes and got probation. Former National Security Advisor Sandy Berger, who stole classified information, then lied about it to investigators, and General David Petraeus, who was convicted of possessing classified documents he should not have had. Both were sentenced to probation. Okay, well, both of these were sentenced to probation. And I suppose there's still a possibility that General Flynn could be sentenced to probation. Remember, they have already kicked the can down the road on his sentencing a few times. And I think there's a real specific reason for that, because as we're starting to see this material come out, and of course, Sidney Powell, right in the kisser, has done a great job of making sure that this does come out. I think that what we're going to see is this is probably going to get thrown out altogether. That would be the hope, but it looks like at the very least it would be a very light sentence and probably just some probation for General Flynn. Now, let me take you up here because they're actually interviewing Sidney Powell, and I've got you queued up, so check it out.
What they have done to this 33-year veteran is a obnoxious, repulsive, unbelievable abuse of power.
It is, and they've been abusing their power for the last year in spades, Sean. The reason this all came to this is because they tried to get him to lie in the prosecution of United States versus Rafikian, his former business partner. And with new counsel standing by his side, of course, there was no way I was going to let him do that, and he didn't want to do that. So we pushed back on that with evidence that we presented to them for hours, showing them all kinds of different things that supported the fact that he was telling the truth. And instead, they doubled down, came against him, tried to designate him a co-conspirator, even though they had told the judge in the Eastern District that he was not. They never thought he was. I mean, it's just been one atrocity after the other, and then their recent sentencing memo is just full of lies and distortions. So they breached the plea agreement when they tried to withdraw their motion to recommend that he was going to be given probation and want him sent to prison.
And now they changed it. Yeah. Now, am I wrong in my perception? I'm not in the courtroom, so I have to ask you and rely on your interpretation. I almost got the impression the judge, in this case, was basically saying to you, without being saying it, Sidney, withdraw the plea. Does he have to approve this, or did you get that same impression from the judge?
Oh, it could go either way. He certainly has a discretion as to whether to allow the withdrawal of the plea, but we're more than convinced we meet all the tests, no matter which way you look at it. And this is just the first part of the motion on that. This portion of the motion is based on the breach of the plea agreement. There are a lot of other reasons that we'll brief as soon as we possibly can.
So there you go, Sidney Powell dropping it like it's hot. And like I said, when you take a look at this case, very much like the impeachment case, when you see that the origins, being the 302s in this case regarding General Flynn, had been altered, and of course it doesn't seem to be very common knowledge about the relationship with Peter Strzok and Rudolph Contreras, I think that you have to look at the entire case. And if prosecution is already backing off saying that they only want a little bit of probation, that means that they're probably not even going to get that. I have a feeling that this is going to totally clear General Flynn of all charges the way it should be. But it remains to be seen. But it looks like either way, we're going to find out very, very soon. Remember, our Freedom Day that Q was talking about is going to be today. Let's move on to 3811. This was posted at 39 minutes after the hour 1, takes you to a Twitter status of Rand Paul, who says, my question today is about whether or not individuals who were holdovers from the Obama National Security Council, Cisco and Barbarella, and Democrat partisans conspired with Schiff staffers to plot impeaching the president before there were formal House impeachment proceedings. My exact question was, are you aware that House Intelligence Committee staffer Sean Cisco had a close relationship with Eric Barbarella while at the National Security Council together? And are you aware and how do you respond to reports that Barbarella and Cisco may have worked together to plot impeaching the president before there were formal House impeachment proceedings? My question is not about a whistleblower. That's because they're leakers, not whistleblowers, as I have no independent information on his identity. My question is about the actions of known Obama partisans within the NSC and House staff and how they are reported to have conspired before impeachment proceedings had even begun. So Senator Rand Paul is asking the right questions and in the right way, because what he's basically doing is he's trolling them, letting them know, I know exactly who your whistleblower is. I'm not going to call them a whistleblower because I know exactly who they are. We know that they worked with the NSC. And I'm flashing you yet another screenshot of my video from October 23rd when we called all of this out in regards to Cisco and Barbarella. And the reason that I've been so frustrated with this is not so much because of the credit not getting spread around correctly. It's the fact that some people, like Mr. Rand Paul and some other reporters, are allowed to say this name. They're allowed to print this name, yet some of us are not. That's not okay. That's not free speech. And that's not the United States of America that I seem to remember we should be living in. But either way, it looks like we are eventually going to put this guy on Front Street and people are going to have to say his name regardless of who dug it up. It's going to come out and people are going to want to hear from him when they do. And Senator Rand Paul, like I said, is asking the right questions. Q adds on in post 38:12, 42 minutes after the hour of 1. We see a couple links right here to Paul Sperry. Q says, remember these names. The first one says, breaking, Eric Barbarella, the CIA operative believed to be the whistle leaker, is captured in this 2015 photo, taking notes between Biden advisor Michael Carpenter, who is this guy right here in the light blue suit, and NSC's Liz Zentos in White House meeting, who's on the other side of Barbarella right here. Carpenter later appeared with Biden in infamous son of a bitch vid. And that's actually the next tweet right here. You can see the picture on the left, Michael Carpenter and alleged whistleblower Gary Barbarella, and Michael Carpenter over here with Joe Biden during the infamous son bitch he got fired thing. Okay, so look, I want to make it very, very clear. I think Paul Sperry does a lot of really, really great work, but I'm calling this out, and to be quite honest with you, I'm a little bit disappointed in Q2, although I don't think there was anything malicious here, so don't look too much into what I'm saying. I'm just calling a spade a spade. Greg Rubini called this out long before. No, sorry, Sean Davis. Eric Barbarella was revealed by Greg Rubini on October 11th, which was 19 days before Paul Sperry article. And there it is right there. There it is. And of course, Greg Rubini was kind enough to work with me on the video that I just showed you that has since been shut down. So like I said, this is not a knock on Paul Sperry. He does great work. And this isn't all about finding the credit. But the fact of the matter is like I said, some people have been squashed. My video is still set to private and I cannot change it. I can't unclick it. I can't do anything. I haven't been charged with a violation. So it would seem like YouTube should charge me with a violation if I'm actually guilty of something. Otherwise, why am I being forced to have my video set to private? That is a violation of my free speech. And I feel that the same thing has been done with Greg Rubini. I feel he's been really given the shaft. Now, Greg Rubini has done a wonderful thread with some extra information. We're not going to cover a lot of it today, but I will leave it down below. I'll try and see if I can post a thread reader app for you, and that'll be down below. But he's got a lot of extra information in regards to our Gary Large Nutella, and he's done a ton of great work, and I just think it's really important to call it out. So once again, don't read me the wrong way. No one's hating on Paul Sperry. No one's crying because they're not getting any credit. The fact of the matter is that some people are free to do some reporting and free to do some free speech, and other people just simply aren't. And I would have hoped that Q would have noticed that. Now, maybe Q's obviously got a lot of things to do, and of course they follow Paul Sperry very closely, so I don't have any problem with that at all. So look, at the end of the day, no one's knocking anybody. I just want to make sure that the people who actually put months and months of their hard work get some attention for this, and I do believe Greg Rubini is worthy of that. So I will leave that down below, and if we have some downtime from Q, I may even cover a couple of his threads because he's done a lot of great work. But we now know who this guy is. He's going to get put out on Front Street, and eventually I think there's going to be cries to actually hear him testify. Incidentally, those questions that were posed by Rand Paul were not read by Chief Justice John Roberts. It's almost like they don't want to get to the bottom of this thing. And speaking of not wanting to get to the bottom of this thing, let's move on to 3813, 53 minutes after the hour of 1. Q says, worth remembering again. And it takes us to the status of Michael Sheridan. We saw this the other day at Boomer 4K. He's our high definition patriot. Watch Representative Ratcliffe tell Maria Bartiromo why Schiff is hiding the 18th transcript. And the 18th transcript is basically what turns our attention to the fact that our Gary Large Nutella is the one who was actually making statements. He actually went to the ICIG to make statements under penalty of perjury, and they weren't true. His relationship with Adam Schiff wasn't exactly what he stated. And now that you can see that he had quite a few different relationships in Ukraine with the Bidens as well, and with John Brennan, as Greg Rubini will thoroughly point out in the threads below. So this is very interesting. And this is all because of this transcript that we haven't seen, this 18th Atkinson transcript that Ratcliffe is talking about. And of course, that's Adam Schiff. And Adam Schiff doesn't seem to want to release this. I wonder why. Maybe it's because it comes straight directly back to him. So this is what we're dealing with, folks. This is what we're dealing with. And all I can think of is that these guys who go to DC every single day and actually have to look in the faces of these people and actually sit in these hearings, it must be absolutely exhausted, because I'm just sitting here talking to you about it and I'm already exhausted. But you get the idea. Once we release this transcript, then of course I think there will probably be a public demand, and I would imagine probably a public release of our Larry farm and villa. Post 3814, 54 minutes after the hour of 3, we get taken back to this April 27, 2018 post where Q had said done in 30, and there was a 30 in brackets. And you can see at the time there was a link. The title to the article was from Fox News. House report backs claim that FBI agents did not think Flynn lied despite guilty plea. This has always been the curious thing for so many of us, right? Especially people who don't really understand what's happening here and don't really understand the insidious nature of the people that were trying to get to Flynn. But he was definitely pressured into pleading guilty. Why would Flynn plead guilty to something untrue? Well, because they were going to go after the kids. They were going to have 6 ways a Sunday to get into them, right? And so the testimony that was on record seems to have been changed, right? We know this, that Joseph Pientka was likely one of those guys that were altering some of these statements. And I think it's important to keep bringing up that the original judge that accepted this plea was personal friends with Peter Strzok. And I think it's also important to remember that shortly, it wasn't even 24 hours after the FBI discovered Hillary Clinton's email situation, it was Peter Strzok's wife that was promoted to associate director of the SEC. These are really, really important connections that I find go completely unnoticed, especially on these mainstream media outlets. But this was all connected, right? Who knows where the bodies are buried? Well, Flynn did. And he likely knew that Ted Cruz was being spied on and whoever else was being spied on. We know that Admiral Mike Rogers also knew this. We knew that Devin Nunes also knew this. And I'd like to just toss one more name in the ring for you. Ezra Cohen Watnick. Don't forget that name. Remember, Christopher Walken shows up in the middle of the movie. You're like, yeah! This movie's going to be sweet. Flynn is safe. Expand your thinking. So keep in mind, back at this time, we thought that this case would actually be done in maybe 30 days. We didn't know what done in 30 meant. So is Q saying that being January 30th, where we actually see the prosecution really, really back off? Like I said, that's a big move. Recommending probation is essentially nothing, because that's usually, if you're trying to go after something, you go for the max, and then of course it gets whittled down to something else. So if they're starting off with simply just recommending probation, I would imagine that Flynn's going to come out plenty clean on this. Today is January 30th. Coincidences are fun. So it sounds like Q is tying this back to saying that, hey, we knew this back in April of 2018 when we said done in 30. Had they said done on 30, that might have been a little bit more speculative for some nefarious actors. So done in 30 is enough to kind of give it some plausible deniability. And at the the same time make the point. Thanks, DOJ. All right, kids, those are your Q posts. I want to spend at least a few minutes on this thread here from Greg Rubini. Not sure if it's his very latest one of his latest ones, at Greg Rubini on Twitter. And of course, I'll link it down below, but I wanted to make sure that I shared at least some of this with you for those of you who may not read it. I will also link the link on our BitChute, my BitChute and my DropSpace in regards to the video that we made. This was made back in October, and of course it has been censored by YouTube. You can find them on BitChute and DropSpace, but I think you may have to be a member to see them, but they will be linked for you down below. And in this thread, we're just going to go ahead and call him Very Large Vanilla. Is involved in much darker things than you can imagine. Thread: Joe Biden, John Brennan, and Barack Hussein the Membrane Obama are also in on it, and Victoria Nuland, the Ukraine Holocaust. Please retweet, and there's our boy right there. In February 2014, there was a coup d'etat in Ukraine, a violent coup. There was a massacre in the main square of the capital, Kyiv. 100 people were killed. And of course, we covered this, and you may have remembered this. It was a terrible, terrible event. Number 3, there were snipers at windows of tall buildings surrounding the square, strategically placed. The snipers from the buildings shot both at protesters, both at police officers. It was a horrific massacre. Yeah, so keep that in mind. Shot at both protesters and police as if they were just starting some trouble. Now, I am going to play you a little bit of this video. Check it out.
What is that? Huh? That window, facing directly to us. Okay. Get the...
All right, there you go. He was about to drop an F-bomb on you, so I moved on, but you get the idea. Number 4, 100 people were killed by the snipers, both Ukrainian citizens, both police officers. That was the Ukraine Holocaust. Okay, so think right there. Who would be motivated to do such a thing? To kill citizens and police officers? The snipers were professional mercenaries. They were hired and paid to do that job. Their assigned job was to kill about 100 people. They had been given precise instructions. Hired and paid by whom? Why 100 people had to be brutally killed? Because the CIA Director John Brennan and Victoria Nuland State Department wanted 100 people killed. That would trigger a coup d'etat in Ukraine, which in fact happened. And who organized those snipers in Ukraine to make this massacre? Who hired them? Who paid them? Very Large Vanilla in this photo with Victoria Nuland. Very Large Vanilla was assigned that task by the CIA Director John, he's a brute, by Brennan. Brennan was a CIA director at that time in 2014, and Very Large Vanilla was and is a CIA operative, as we explained in that video. He was Brennan's CIA point man in Ukraine in 2014. Very Large Vanilla is a CIA operative. He speaks fluently Ukrainian and Russian, which we also demonstrate in the video. Very Large Vanilla was the perfect guy for the job and a Brennan loyalist. Very Large Vanilla has been many times in Ukraine, and he flew several times to Ukraine with Joe Biden. And of course, think about that very plane that he would have flown on with Joe Biden, right? Yeah, government-sponsored plane. Very Large Vanilla is the guy responsible for the Ukraine Holocaust, which killed 100 people. This is why the CIA and the deep state protects him. And this is why the deep state and the CIA do not want Very Large Vanilla's name to be spoken. This is the reason of the cover-up. And again, ladies and gentlemen, this is why I moan about it, because it's important. I don't just whine about any single video that gets taken down here and there. That kind of stuff happens as a content creator. This is information that matters, and it really, really matters, because it depends on whether or not we impeach a president of the United States or not. And of course, you know all the deeper implications that all of that means. Cover up, also by Chief Justice John Roberts, who is compromised, blackmailed, and owned by the CIA. This is why there are gag orders not to pronounce Very Large Vanilla's name. Gag orders by the CIA. The horrific truth of what Very Large Vanilla did in Ukraine cannot be revealed. Very Large Vanilla hired and paid the snipers and organized the Ukraine massacre under John Brennan's orders. But who authorized Brennan to proceed with the massacre of 100 people in Ukraine? None other than Barack Hussein in the Membrane Obama. So now you see why this is so big, right? And I did want to add this right here too. From Deplorable Joe, thanks for this. Misko, being our other whistle leaker, was hired by Schiff in August about the same time the complaint was filed, I believe, by very large vanilla with the ICIG. And of course, Greg Rubini is agreeing, and that we pointed out in the video as well. So there you go. And thanks again, Greg Rubini, for all you do. All right, Patriots, that's all I got for you for now. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. I greatly appreciate those of you who do that already. If you would like to see this whistle leaker video, you can find it over on my DropSpace or here on BitChute if you like. And as you can see, it's right there at the top of your screen. It is dated from October 23rd. So when you go to BitChute, you're going to have to scroll down a little bit until you get to that date, October 23rd. But as you can see, the title of the video is entitled Whistleblower / Large Vanilla, but you can check it out from there. And of course, do the same thing on DropSpace. You'll be able to find it over there too. You'll just probably have to scroll down a little bit. Those are linked down below. I will try and see if I can get a link to Greg Rubini's thread down below. That'll all be linked down below in the video description, as well as my alternate channels if you want to get to them. And I will try and see if I can put a link to this directly down below as well. That's all I got for you today. This is Sir Patrick Mack, and until next time, stay pursued.